Okay, for people joining this live stream, this is looking at some incremental language development topics for Wolfram language. And first on our list is things to do with trees.
Right.
Okay.
So here we are adding options to trees. And this only involves standard options, not annotations for a moment. So yeah,
Okay.
Can you explain?
Right. So the idea is that some of the options will be global, and for those we'll take the options from the root, and then other options allow you to specify things by position. Those are
Okay.
local options.
So the main issue is what seeps down the tree and how do we specify that? And what is the tree and this and all its subtrees, this tree element and all its subtrees? And what's this tree element on its own? Is that correct?
Yes.
So what's an example of an option? Excuse me. That is okay. So tree color. Oh boy.
So color is a local option, but for example, aspect ratio is a global option.
Why can't you set aspect ratio for a subtree?
Because graphics and graph don't do it. And it would be difficult. So it could happen that eventually some of the global options are promoted to local, but at the moment, most of the graphics standard options we consider global.
Okay. So, I mean, but not all graph options make any sense here. Like graph layout doesn't make any sense, right?
Right.
We have graph layout. It's one of the only graph specific options that we directly have.
But like, for example, laying out the tree sideways, up, down, whatever.
Yeah, that's
Isn't there a better way to do that?
The only way I'm aware of to do that is with graph layout, and that's a sub option to layered embedding. And
okay,
then,
but I think that's a very bad place to put it, because I think that doesn't TreePlot support options much more directly for places the root whatever at position whatever. What does that mean? So for this case, we have to say what the root is, right? For a tree plot, we have to say what the root is because we don't know intrinsically, or do we know? We could know from the structure of the graph.
Yeah.
So there's something slightly screwy about this. Oh, look. Oh, I see. This could be a multi-rooted tree. So it has a second argument, which is the position. Okay, so I claim that tree should have some kind of tree orientation option.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
What would that be analogous to? Don't we have something similar to that someplace else?
There's a sub option of the layered embedding called orientation that works just like this.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we add tree orientation also as an option to tree plot, just for consistency, even though it's supported as a second argument?
Okay.
Now, in tree, we don't get to have multi-trees, as in multi-rooted trees, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so I mean, are you sure we shouldn't have something called tree layout? Because I can imagine other things, like, for example, the fact that these are diagonal
so
lines.
An argument against graph layout is that when you're specifying sub options, some of them allow you to specify a particular vertex for some reason or other. And in that, you're using like an index. So we might want a tree layout.
Let's
where
not
you
have a
use
graph layout. Let's not use graph layout for this. I think
Yeah,
it's a
so
mistake.
like if you use a tree at layout, then we could actually use positions, which is how all of the other, like, we don't have vertex labels, but we do have tree label. Because they take position.
Okay, but I think what we should do is have a thing called tree layout, analogous to graph layout. And I think it should allow you to specify things like, are these diagonals, or do they come out, from the one coming out, you know what I'm saying? There are different ways to draw this, right?
Are you saying having tree layout that does all of the same things as graph layout, or tree layout
No.
that has additional new kinds of
No, completely different kinds of things. If it so happens that we can use a graph layout capability for tree layout, fantastic, but that's under the hood and done by us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, do we want to have the capability to have a tree done with spring electrical embedding? Does that even make any sense? Did you understand what I'm asking? Did you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
There are multiple representations of trees, but
I'm not sure what you mean by make sense. You like right now I have implemented, you can plot this tree in a spring electrical embedding.
Okay.
The question, like, would we want to be able to do that? I don't
Yes.
know, but it's already supported. So
okay, fine, I understand that, but I mean, in something like a hyperbolic embedding, that seems useful. Okay, look, what I'm saying is, if we have tree layout, it's going to support some of the graph layout options and not others. Is that right, or is that not right?
I don't see why it couldn't support all of them. And then maybe additional ones specific to tree in the future.
Okay, but you're saying the way it specifies root nodes and things could be different.
Yeah. So I would
can I take this tree and can I run this? What would I do here? Would I say tree and then graph layout, blah, blah, blah?
No, so this is just in a branch right now.
Okay, but if I said graph here and then say graph layout, does that work?
I don't know if graph, but maybe tree graph. Oh, well, that's going to be a problem. Yeah, because that tree has options specified, and that's going to be a syntax error for you.
I see. Okay, fine. Should just regular graph applied to a tree do the equivalent of tree graph, just as a courtesy?
It could. There's the question of, all of the other graph functions that accept, should you be able to pass a tree in to graph functionality and have it automatically convert to a graph?
I don't know. We should inventory that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but so what you're saying here, we definitely want, okay, do we want a separate tree orientation, top, bottom, whatever? Because if you do that, and then you have a tree layout, and the tree layout is, spring electrical embedding, it's like, what the heck does it mean to talk about tree orientation then? You got what I'm saying? Or hyperbolic or something.
Right. I think the main benefit of having tree orientation is that you wouldn't have, like, if you just want to change the orientation to left.
Well, maybe what we should do is say
tree layout, layered embedding, specify.
I know, which is completely wrong, and we shouldn't do that. But we could say something like tree layout arrow left does that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So tree layout could support some of the graph ones, and it could support its own things. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Let's try that. Let's see if that can work. Okay. Let's talk about option globality. Okay. By the way, is there a highlight graph? Can I use highlight graph to highlight a tree?
No.
Now, so how would I highlight a piece of a tree?
Presumably, we would need a tree highlight option.
Well, okay, but let me understand your option, your thing for options for trees here. So what are you proposing here?
So the main thing is the syntax for specifying positions. So you can give a pattern that matches against the positions, and then things matching that pattern will use that style. That's the first thing.
This is how dataset works too.
Okay.
And then the second question is, if you don't specify it as, you know, a list of rules, like if you just say tree label goes to red or tree color goes to red, does that mean just the specific subtree is red or all of the subtrees?
I understand. So, okay, so hold on. First point is, you're saying, so in dataset, you're saying that background is either red, in which case it just means the background of the whole data set is red, or it's a list of position arrow red, so to speak, that specifies.
Exactly.
What's that?
Yes, exactly. And you can have patterns on the left-hand side.
Right. So that's a self-answering question. I mean, because then by analogy with that, tree color arrow red should make the whole thing red. But the problem is, or at least the whole subtree red, right?
Yeah. It wouldn't go up the tree. Everything would be going down.
Yeah, right. But I mean, the question then is there a way of indicating just this element on here? And I mean, that would be something.
Yeah, so you'd say empty list goes to red. There's an example of that.
That's really obscure. That's really obscure. It's really obscure.
It is obscure, but it is consistent with something. For example, extract. It extracts the whole object.
I know, but maybe there's a sugared version of that we could provide.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what are we trying to do? We're trying to represent, by the way, why does it have to have the list around it here?
Probably for a single one, it doesn't have to.
So then what we've got then is tree color arrow. I mean, this is the form that we would have. I don't even know how does that group? Is that correctly grouped? I don't know. There. Actually.
So the fully general case would be a list of rules. So we could also
I understand
just a single rule, and we could.
By the way, Alison, could you note down that thing without the parens to put that in the user assistance meeting to discuss how we indicate what the grouping is?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, I understand the fully general one has a thing that says, okay, so let's review what it is we're doing here. Okay, default case is this whole subtree. Okay.
Okay.
The other case is I want to pick out some elements of that subtree to anoint, so to speak, to paint, to whatever else, right? So in other words, I'm looking ahead down the subtree and I'm saying, pick this, pick 3-2, pick 7-4, right?
Right.
And the other case of relevance is I just want this element here. So what's interesting about that is if you look at the first two arguments of tree, okay, one of those arguments is a subtree designation and the other is a what happens at this element, right?
I don't understand that.
Okay, so if you look at tree,
yeah,
right, By the way, I sure hope the tree plot points to tree. Okay. This B here is about this element itself, right? Whereas the second argument is about the subtree.
Right.
Okay. What I'm wondering, for grid, we have the notion of item. That's a way of wrapping options around a particular thing. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So what that would lead me to is something where you could say tree of item A, I don't know if this is a good idea. I'm not sure this is a good idea.
Well, tree itself can have those options. So I don't think we need item here.
No,
Those
I understand that, but the whole point is we're trying to deal with the ambiguity. Okay, so then there's a subtree here. Okay,
Yep.
So there's two cases. There's when this represents the whole tree, the whole, the A and its subtree is red, whereas the first thing says A alone is red. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
You've got this alternative way of doing that, which is to say elements 1, 2 are red, 3, 4 are green, etc.
Right.
Okay. And you're degenerating that by saying to get this element itself, it's that sublist. Now, obviously, I could as well say, in this case, would this work? Style A, comma red, would that work? Also, how do I change the size?
I think that would work right now, and it would just make the A red, not the vertex.
Does this work right now?
No. Well, try it. I don't think so.
Okay, we've had this issue in grid of whether it expands to the whole grid element, right? And we've got a solution there to that. Okay, so what is our solution there? Look it up. Okay. We don't have our grid experts here. Item style, I think. I thought there was a way of, oh yeah, here we go. This is how it works. This is how it works. What I was saying there is right. It's an item with background arrow red. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
As opposed to just the thing. So the correct version of this would be, I mean, if that's in fact what we want to do with this, I'm not sure it is. So what other options do we have? Do we have a size option? What other local tree options do we have here? We have color.
Right now, just tree color, tree label, and tree label style.
What's a tree label?
So by default, the label is the data, and tree label lets you specify something else to go inside.
Okay, but that's utterly, unbelievably, flamingly obscure. Oh, I see. And the problem is what happens if I said item there, unless we special case the item term, it's going to think that that tree element is item blah, 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 even though that's really just a formatting thing.
Mhm.
So tree label is the analog of vertex label, which is, even though the true name of that element is blah, name it this instead. I see. So the analog of vertex label is, wait a minute, I see, is naming tree elements by their part numbers, right? Do you see what I'm saying? So in vertex label, you can give.
Yeah, so in vertex labels, you give index, arrow, label, and here
Right.
you do position, pattern, arrow, value.
Right. Can you give patterns for vertex label? I think you can, actually. I should do that. I don't tend to do that. Do you think you can give patterns for vertex label? I bet you can.
I think so.
What's that?
I think so.
Okay.
Perhaps instead of item, it should be annotation.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, we should be able to do annotations on a tree, presumably.
Right.
Okay, so hold on a second. So the issue is, does it affect just the element or the subtree? Okay, how do we make it? How do we indicate that it's just this element? And then, I mean, tree label, I mean, clearly, tree element color, we could have another option, tree element color, which would just refer to this one. I don't know what the heck tree label, that seems utterly obscure to me. I mean, in other words, that's a spray labeling, so to speak, if you understand what I'm saying. By spray labeling, I mean you are at a particular node in the tree and you spray labels into subparts of subtrees.
But we have two methods here. You can control everything from some root or higher up node, or you can specify locally what you want in each tree
Yes.
object. And so our idea was that the deeper object, the deeper specification takes precedence.
Sure. Okay, fine. But then, so one solution would be a tree element color, right? I mean, I'm not saying you can't support the null whatchamajigamy here, but I think that's very obscure.
Well, we could do the opposite. We could say tree color red goes to affects just this element, and tree color blank goes to red or something like that, affects everything further down, which is perhaps more readable.
Yes, except that tree color would, to me, not connote just that item.
But that's an independent decision from the rest of the syntax, because the general syntax has two rules: tree color rule, pattern rule red. The tree color red, it's up to us what to do with it.
I know. But I mean, I'm saying.
So the tree label,
Look,
for example, is going to affect only this node. So why not tree
say
color
it again.
red?
What?
Tree label hello only affects this node. So we could say that tree color red only affects this node too.
Why is it called tree label? See, the problem is vertex label. I think it's confusing. Let me see. Tree color red.
No, I mean,
It's like a tree node label.
Are we calling them nodes?
Well, that's why I didn't use the word node, because I'm trying not to ever use the word node.
And the problem is tree element color would be, well, okay. So one approach is tree color, as you're saying, defaults to the current node.
Right.
I mean, allowing the possibility all arrow red as an alternative to blank arrow red seems a perfectly nice piece of syntax.
The dataset also interprets all as blank.
Okay. Well, maybe this is right. To just have it be local to that node. I think that's less grotesque. I think it's more useful.
So we could have all of these options consistently do the same thing, or have some of the options are inherited by default and some are
No, don't have them all be local.
Okay.
Which ones might be
Well, so for illustration purposes, I had tree label just being just this subtree, and tree color and tree label style being inherited. Just so we
why do we need a tree label style?
that changes the color of the label.
Well, why can't you just do that by putting a style wrapper for the label?
I mean, sure.
I think that's what we should
Tree
do.
label style is.
We don't have a label style.
Yes,
we
do.
don't have a
vertex label style.
Really?
Yes. So tree color corresponds to vertex style. Tree label is.
Wait. Why does tree color? No, we have a vertex color as well.
I don't think so.
We have vertex colors. Oh, no, we don't. Oh, yeah, we have vertex style, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it should be called node style or just vertex style. Could we reuse vertex style?
Why not tree style?
Because tree style. Because that strongly suggests it's the subtree. If we said node style, if we really wanted to use that, then it would make it clear it's that particular node. But tree style strongly suggests a subtree.
Well, in a sense, it can control the whole tree. It is that by default, it just affects this tree, this node. So we have avoided the word node because then it may become confusing.
Yes. Well, look, tree element style would be a clear name. Tree element label. These would, I think, be clear names.
But still, they can have a list of rules affecting the whole tree.
Absolutely. So if it is tree element style, and you say all arrow green, then that's fine. It just says all of the tree elements are green.
Right.
Whereas if you say tree element style arrow green, it means this particular tree element is green.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with this. Tree element label, and in the weird case, you could say tree element label arrow all arrow blah.
Mm-hmm. And tree element label style.
I'd skip that one. Why do we need it?
Just
something
parity with graph.
Right. And other places like grid lines and grid lines style. So there is a separation.
Well, I'm not sure, but I mean, if we're going to do that, I would have thought a more useful thing to do would be, let's see, tree element label function. which takes the tree element payload and derives the label from it, right? That to me would be much more useful. And that's something I keep on needing in a graph. Right? In other words, I have some actual raw underlying names of nodes in the graph. And I want to, process that for the actual label. I think we should go with tree element style and tree element label and wait on the label style thing and consider the possibility of tree element label function. Okay.
Okay.
All right, let's go on.
So one question there is the defaults for these things. So inherited versus automatic, we were thinking of considering them equivalent.
I don't agree. I mean, I think automatic means the green thing, and inherited would mean from higher in the tree.
Well, in either case, whether you use inherited or automatic, if there's something higher in the tree, you're going to use that.
If there's a spraying, if it's an all arrow, whatever.
Yeah, if there is a rule from higher up that applies, there may not be, then you would use that. And then otherwise you would use some default value.
Let's just go with automatic then, meaning that. I mean, inherited, I don't know what inherited means. It could be equivalent to automatic, but I would just leave it undefined.
Okay.
For now. I have a feeling that might be necessary at some point. What on earth is vertex capacity? I've never used vertex capacity. What is that? What is that? What on earth is that? Is that for flow? Somebody should clean this up and make it clearer what on earth this is. What is this? This is just crazy. Okay, Addison complained to the graph people about this. This is a page that explains nothing.
I marked it down.
I mean, I can kind of guess what it does, but yeah. Okay. All right. I think we're done with this.
Okay.
Excellent. I'm about to have another big application for trees, just to let you know.
Great.
Okay. All right. Great.
Yep.
Let's go on to the next item.
Okay, so here Bill Gosper has suggested that we change this case in which we are always returning the maximal length. So ShiftRegisterSequence in this case is always returning the maximal length, even if the cycle is shorter. I think he's correct.
Oh yeah, that's crazy. Okay, wait a minute. That's just bonkers. Okay, so hold on. Let me just understand background noise. Background noise.
That's me leaning back in my chair, waiting to hear how you explain the defect in this function that you once designed.
Well, you sound
a little bit jaded.
No, I know. I was complaining about your audio quality, not your comments.
Wow.
Gives a maximal length sequence for a size and linear feedback shift register. So
I think the
what
problem
is
is this, the second line.
with given taps.
Exactly. It says gives the complete sequence, but we don't say what complete means.
Exactly. And it's completely bonkers. By complete sequence, what I thought I meant when I designed that was the sequence until it repeats.
I see.
Not some puffed sequence, so to speak.
Mhm.
Yeah, this just seems completely wrong. I mean, this is, okay, so hold on.
So it's easier to see the example in the next section, I think. So here we see the cycle and what we return compared.
Well, it's just wrong. We should just return the cycle.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
You know, that's, you know, we're done. This one, yeah, this one, we should just change it.
Right.
Jose, do you know offhand if we have a bug report filed?
It doesn't even say.
I think we do.
Okay. I don't, it doesn't even commit itself to what's going on. So I just think it's just a mistake. And somebody should tell Gosper when we fixed it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. WFR candidates, just for a few minutes.
Well, this is the meta conversation, which is how do we expedite this process?
Okay.
A lot of
Okay.
the functions
Yes.
that we greenlight really are specific to certain groups, not all, but many. And it might be more effective if we went straight to those groups.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that the stuff for this meeting is stuff that is in the ILD wheelhouse.
Yes.
As, you know, that we could have invented specifically here, but it so happened to come through the function repository.
Yeah, I think that would be the, you know, or even we could even take the spillover, you know, things that maybe we wouldn't have come up with here, but that don't seem to fit cleanly elsewhere. We can
Yes,
also
that's fine.
consider. But there's an issue of follow-up, which is,
yes, there is. Yes, I know.
yes. How do we work on that? Work through that?
See, the problem is, what's happening is, okay, there's ILD, and there is a thing we've never built, which is essentially IAD, incremental algorithm development. Because what happens in the algorithm R&D operation mostly is that it's working on big subsystems, right? Not, oh, let's add this round, like ShiftRegisterSequence is an example of an IAD type thing. That is, it doesn't really relate to much else. It's just a function we put in that's useful. Am I making sense?
Yeah,
As opposed
it could be
to,
considered ILD.
it could be, because it's just about lists. But I mean, but my point is, think about something. Well, let's see an example of a thing that isn't an ILD thing, that is a function repository thing that seems like it has a, you know, has a future.
Well, I mean, we can go right below and
Yeah, but
into
most
the
of these are
candidates.
not. Most of these seem okay. So ciphers, for example. Okay, I mean, these things will be connected into the cryptography functions.
Yes. Now, I mean, my view of it is if we take them, we should take them all, have a classical cipher and a classical decipher function, and just have a second argument saying which cipher.
I don't understand why we're not just making that part of encrypt. Why isn't it just?
The reason I think we shouldn't is I think encrypt is a much more modern type of functionality, and there's going to be many different, the differences in methods under the hood are going to be substantial. I think this would just be litter inside an encrypt function, but perfectly sensible in a classical cipher function. Just my view of it. But
You might
this
be
is an
right.
example of something that doesn't really go to ILD necessarily.
No.
It probably should go to a different team to consider, among other things, that kind of design issue.
Right. Well, so there's a cryptography group, so it should go there.
Okay. So
long as it doesn't just get rejected there, that's the problem.
Well, that's where we come up with the issue of follow through.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to understand the size of the problem, because the things you're showing here are mostly not incremental algorithm development.
Right.
The things that I think of as algorithm development are, look, the point is random functions in the function repository that are useful, but are not language type functions.
Yeah, I mean, to give a quick estimate, I'd say maybe 30% of what we greenlight for further consideration probably will end up with ILD. So 70% would not, give or take.
Okay, magic square.
So we have already classified the suggestions, and we have already hundreds. So these are the language related. So the image processing, etc.
I see, a separate. Well, maybe we need a separate meeting for those. And then let's see what happens for a couple of those. Which groups are primarily implicated?
Jose, do you have that full list? We've got language, we've got math, we've got image processing, graphics and image, I think. Right. We subdivided it in a way that was crude, but basically reflected the types of functions that were getting greenlit for further scrutiny.
Right. I think we have like 7.
Yes, that sounds right.
All right, so we're going to need some separate meetings for those other groups. Like, okay, magic square, where does it go? Not a crazy function for us to consider having.
This one we have in language. It's like ciphers and then subholds.
Okay. All right, so you've identified that as being sufficiently non-algorithmic heavy lifting.
Right.
Yes.
So we have clear statistics functions and clear image processing functions, etc.
Okay, so asymptotes, for example, or Bezier interpolating control points.
Right. So those are more in the math category.
Right.
Oh, we've got a lot of interesting stuff here.
Are these the ones that are on our list, Jose?
No. I've just.
Oh, okay. These are just random. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. Great. Okay.
The thing is, some of that interesting stuff we decide in meetings should be looked at for possible inclusion in the language, but then there's no step forward from there. We're trying to funnel it through these meetings, and that's just not working.
So, I think it's a question. Okay, I think we should do a sample of maybe 2 other ones with other groups and see what happens. Okay, and the conclusion may be this is not part of our mainstream development. It's never going to happen.
Right.
Okay, in which case we need to look at some incremental algorithm development effort, which I wouldn't mind seeing anyway.
It's still going to be an issue because it encroaches in other groups.
Well, it depends on where the resources for that group come from. Right?
Well,
if it's a new thing, then it isn't encroaching on anything.
No, sure, but if 70%, are hitting, say, algorithms R&D, or in one form
I understand
or another.
That. I'm saying if there is a good reason, okay, if we want new people to work on IAD, right?
Yeah,
that's a possibility. I just want to inventory. Is there a thing to do there, or are we going to say, actually, it isn't? We don't need that. It's these things are perfectly happy. Yeah. Right, I got distracted because I've got to go to another live stream. I've got something I have to do right before then.
We could schedule a separate, perhaps not live streamed run through meeting, I think.
Yeah,
to
I mean, look,
consider
what's
this
going to happen
topic.
here is, I mean, this is going to get more procedural and management related, I suspect. But I think the first thing is inventory does a group that is in a specific development area think these functions are worth having. Okay. There's three possibilities. They don't think they're worth having. They say leave them in WFR. They say we'd love to have them. We don't have the power, people power to do them, but they fit into what our plans are. Slot them in for 2 years from now. Or third case is they're fine to have. They're just irrelevant to our mainstream development. There is no time schedule for them.
There's a fourth case, and it's the one that I really worry about. And that is that we funnel these to other groups and they get ignored.
Well, but then we need a definitive thing. If they say, okay, so here's the question, and this relates also to project lists and so on. If they say this will fit into the thing that we are planning for 3 years from now, then in many cases we'll say that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If they say this will never fit, we have nothing, this is a proboscis of that is just hanging out there somewhere and we're never going to do it, that's a different case.
Those are both fine outcomes.
Well, the outcome you're concerned about is, oh, we'll kind of get to it someday. I think
the outcome, the one I'm concerned with is silence.
Oh yeah, but that's why we're going to have a meeting. The meeting won't contain silence.
Okay.
Right? The meeting will come up with something definitive, and the answer will be, okay, so here's what we're going to insist on. Either they think it should just stay in WFR, it doesn't need to get promoted, right? Number two, they can identify what future project that is in the project list under, on hold or green lighted or whatever it is, right? A future project that they can say this goes into that future project. Or three, they say we'll never get to it. It's not in our plans. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Let me, I need to run off here, and actually I'm doing another live stream in just a couple of minutes here. So good. Thanks, guys. I think that's a reasonable plan. Let's implement it for a couple of these topic areas.
Should we get a separate meeting scheduled?
Yes. It's not an ILD meeting. It's a different meeting. It's a WFR promotion meeting.
Okay. So I think Jose and I should be there.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. Right.
Thanks all.
See you later.